Slaptail Squad, assemble.
All right. Well, welcome, members of the great Slaptail Nation, my own personal Slaptail Nation army. This is the Slaptail Squad, and I'm the Beaveman, Master of the Universe, Lord, Dark Lord, Lord of the Sith, Master of Evil, whatever you want to say is fine with me.
I don't think you're the Master of Evil.
Shut up, Ronz. This is my intro, and immediately, you feel like someone pulls your little chain. You're like a chatty Cathy doll. Just cat. Nobody pulled your chain. So obviously, though, who can't wait for his own little intro is the Ronz, my number 2.
Hey.
Say hello, Ronz. Yeah, be a little bit more enthusiastic. Why do you look like you're lost as fuck? Can't you sit still?
Well, I haven't been in front of my desk with this desk, and I'm just kind of arranging it so.
Are you wearing pants?
I am.
Okay, that's all that matters then, I guess, if you're wearing pants.
Tight.
He did a caveat in there.
That's okay.
Are you wearing pants today?
I'm wearing pants, yes. It's too cold for me to wear my silkies, so I'm wearing pants. It's not silky time yet.
I thought your silkies protected you in every part of the weather.
No, not always. It's got to be really warm. We got some special guests with us today. We've got the Ronz's better half, Karrie. She's with us. Welcome, Karrie.
Hello. Thank you.
Shut up, Ronz. She's fucking trying to speak. She's trying to say hi. You just start speaking.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, just emasculate me in front of my own wife. This is fantastic.
I feel like you probably do that on your own. That's fine. Would it be okay if someone else other than you speaks when I introduce them?
All right, fantastic.
Is it okay?
This is your podcast. You go right ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's Karrie. She's with it.
Gee, thanks.
That's Karrie. She's also with us. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Karrie.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the listeners and the show, I would just like to apologize to you. I'm sorry.
For what?
For what? Who you're married to. Hi-yo!
Oh, wow.
I was waiting for it.
Wow.
Yes. And also with us is... Can I speak?
Go ahead.
It's not your time to interrupt.
In a second. I will tell this funny story.
Will it actually be funny? Because when you try to be funny, it's not usually funny.
No, it will. I guarantee it.
It'll be funny. Okay. All right. Well, also with us is a friend of the show, Keith. Please introduce yourself. Keith, say hi.
Hello.
That's you, Keith. Or are you waiting for Ronz to interrupt to answer for you?
Oh, no. It's me. It's me. Yeah. I mean, there was a thought.
Oh, okay.
Maybe there'd be Ronz, but no, there was not. Breath was bated.
He's a special guest for us. Yeah, breath was bated. He's a special guest for us because he is an expert in his own mind. We don't have real experts on the show. You would say you're an expert in your own mind, would you not, Keith? It is true. Master of
depends on what I'm an expert in.
Okay.
Journeyman at many things. Yes.
Well, because there's no intelligence on this show, but we try to strive to get at least some of it and make a mockery of it if possible. But the Ronz wanted to do this podcast. Ronz, tell us about this podcast, or tell us your funny story first, Ronz.
Well, you know, and this
no, we don't. That's why you're going to tell us.
Oh, well, okay. 30 years ago, I was in a small bar in the Netherlands, and there was this guy going around insulting me, right? And I walked away from the fight, right? And we were outside, and I was walking back with my then girlfriend, Karrie. Maybe you don't seen her. And this guy did something. He just really insulted me. He went to do something, and I flipped him on his back, and I had my hand in his throat. He says, "Just kill me." I'm like, "You're not worth it. I got a podcast to do in 30 years, and this will be a funny story when I tell it. So I'm going to save it."
I remember that. What he was just not in a good place that night. That's what it was. Didn't he have like a piece of broken glass in his hand, and he was like coming across and
I don't remember.
It was chocolate.
I knew this guy was
he
like
was in
out.
a bad place, but
Yeah.
he came at me, and I just put him on his back real quick with a flip, and it landed on top of his chest. And after that, I just got to remember they're just words. They are at the end of
Was
the day.
it so was that because of your extensive background in jiu-jitsu and judo that you were able to flip him on his back like that?
It was. It actually was. No, actually, I hadn't been training in any style for quite a long time. I had some lessons while I was in England, then it fell to the wayside. I really didn't practice that much.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because the audience might not know this and our guests might not know this either, but did you guys know that Ronz is a black belt?
Ooh.
I am.
Ooh.
But more so, I am in the company of higher black belts than I. Right? So I feel like, I'm humbled by each one of your presence. So, wow. Thank you. Right?
That brought up a question for me, and I actually had to write this question down. This is for you, Ron.
Oh, well, fantastic.
Are you ready? So, Ron.
Yes, that is me.
You're a martial artist.
Martial artist practitioner.
And, yeah. Oh, no, you're going to change it. Okay.
Yes, I am.
So you practice karate.
Yes, I do.
Kabuto. And I guess now you're doing Arnis.
Yes, I am.
Correct?
Kudo and Arnis.
So tell me, is there a reason why you gravitate to peasant forms of martial arts?
Yes, there is. Because it's the lowly peasant that actually runs the damn place. So, if you look at all our societies real quick, right, if you're a bureaucrat, you really don't run, you just negotiate, right? It's I actually run the country. I just let you think you do.
Well, I meant that to be insulting, but I guess you didn't get it, so that's fine.
That's okay. But why?
So, Ronz, why don't you tell us what this podcast is about then, and why you've got these guests on here?
Well, it was suggested that we do a podcast on Crusade battles and the series Nightfall, which was based on the Crusades and the Templar Knights. And who better than our local resident expert, right? And I'm not talking about you, Beaveman. I'm talking about Keith, of course. Hey-oh, Keith, not you. Don't get your ego in a twit. About the. Thank you, Keith. I just like the way you rolled your eyes there for a second. Keep going. Yeah, I'll just take myself in cheaper. Now I'm gonna get the words wrong, but to me I'll shorten it. I'll just say Fiore, right? And I've taken a few lessons from Keith, right? And I also know him as.
Was I there?
Yeah, you were there.
Just kidding.
Oh, it's years ago.
Just kidding.
Yeah, it was years ago. I know him as Sensei Keith, but Keith is to me the expert in this, right? And I've watched his class grown, right? And it's fantastic. And he could break down some of the battles and tell us if they're real or not, what was fake, right? And did that actually happen during that time period?
Fascinating.
I think so, dear chap. What do you think?
Well, let's ask Keith if he can give us just a little blip of his background, because and let me ask you the question that I ask everyone who practices martial arts, Keith, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
would
you
consider
said
yourself?
Usually you just throw it out there.
Do you consider yourself a martial artist?
Did you? A martial artist. I don't know how there's much art to some of what I do. So maybe that's the problem. Or perhaps I would say that I consider myself a martial artist in the sense of almost a medieval version of an art, which is applying knowledge to create order out of chaos. I think there's that. So, and that really is the best viewpoint on it. So what I practice, as I practice with a lot of things, is an art, but it's not necessarily, am I a martial artist? I don't think I present this beautiful, holistic, artistic vision of what you should be doing. I try to do what I'm supposed to. I guess that's maybe the best way of viewing it, or at least what I think I'm supposed to. I don't know. I think it's hard. I don't know what a martial artist is.
Would you
Interesting
consider
answer.
yourself a martial arts practitioner then?
Well, if you just mean, am I somebody who practices things that are called martial arts? Yes. And do I identify what I do as a martial art? Yes, because it's a convenient grab bag sort of group of things. I don't do combative sports per se because I'm not doing competitive one-on-one sort of, or even multiple parties going at each other sort of activities within what I do. So is it a combative sport? No. Is it clearly training a very specific set of things within a martial tradition? Yes. So for example, I've spent, I don't know, coming up on 2 decades now, focusing on the martial tradition of Fior de Liberi, which I term l'arte d'ammizzare, or the art of arms. I would say in 20 years of doing this, I'm starting to maybe figure it out a little bit in terms of what he meant. Why? Because I'm practicing necromancy. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out what he meant 600 years ago in 4 separate manuals that he laid out. And I'm trying to apply some other stuff where I'm patching in weird frog DNA, if you want to use a Jurassic Park approach, from 150 years later when I can see what somebody else is doing, or 100 years later when I can see somebody who's clearly in his lineage but has this other approach to it, Vadi. Or maybe I'm patching in stuff from a German tradition, and all of that's coming together to create something that he'd probably say, yeah, interesting, and then proceed to destroy me. Because I'm studying something written by a guy that already says if he had studied law and medicine, he'd been a lawyer and a doctor, and he could have studied religion and been, priest. And all of those are, he's like, oh, I've been doing this so long that I could have done any of those and still not have spent as much time as I spent studying the art of arms. This is a guy whose students persisted in history. Like, we have records of their duels. And I'm sitting here going, well, I'm trying to do what he shows in these manuals and what he talks about in these manuals, but it's just necromancy. I'm just trying to dig up dead bones and make them maybe a little fleshed out. Is that a martial artist? I don't know. On that end.
What was the question? What was the question I asked?
I think I
martial
did an erudite version of what Ronz does in these.
I think honestly, I think you did really great, because usually, if I do that, the Beaveman makes these weird sounds, and let me show you on camera for those who can't. The Beaveman tilts back his head and snores a bit, right, and it just goes like that. But
I respect him.
Yes, I was going to say
his eyes rolled back. It was fine.
You forget this difference.
Yeah.
You forgot this.
He's
difference,
more subtle with me.
Yeah. Usually with the Beaveman,
I've been listening to this for almost 10 years, Ronz. I mean,
yeah.
When he starts talking about midgets and things like that, that's when I know he's gone off the rails.
And let me say this about Keith. When I took one of his classes, he really impressed me one day when we're out there and I was practicing with him, and he wasn't having a good day. Like most martial arts practitioners, they'll try and mask it, or they'll try and make the class work that much harder through whatever reason. I remember, Keith, you just turned around and looked at the class. I'm a little pissy, so deal with me. And I'm like, here is a man who just put it out there. I thought, he has you had my instant respect right there. Instead of trying to mask it or just whatever, you said, I'm upset with the world. You need to deal with me, not the other way around. And I'm like, okay, that we can deal with. I mean, I thought that was so cool.
Now, being a third-party observer, Ronz, because I've
Yes.
seen you in your class several times.
Are you stalking
The
me?
immediate thought
What do you think
immediate
of me
thought
and my
I would
black
have
goatee?
is the
Do you
reason
think
he was
I- my
pissy
black
was
goatee?
probably your fault.
Say that again. You overspoke.
I said the reason he was probably pissy as a third-party observer, I would suspect that it was probably your fault.
In what way?
Just your mere presence. I mean,
Just
it doesn't seem like you do very much. In any of your classes, when the instructor seems pissy and irritated, I just naturally assume it's because of you.
Well, that may be true, but I have to upset them in some formal way. I mean, I just don't walk onto a presence or a field or a floor just to piss somebody off.
No, you don't. So then let us proceed. Then we have sort of determined that Keith is an expert in some way, shape, or form, at least more of an expert than the rest of us. I'd just like to ask Keith one more question. And keep in mind that whether it's a yes, no answer, we know what the real answer is. Have you ever seen a more talented student than the Beaveman, Keith?
Oh,
I
jeez.
would like to. I would like to take a little time to contemplate how best to appreciate my overwhelming gratitude and admiration of the Beaveman.
Wow.
I'm
So
kidding.
we know what
Wow.
the answer is, folks.
That
We know what
is
the answer is.
that is a
We all
textbook
know what the
lawyer
answer
answer.
is.
I like that.
Yes.
Now I have seen the Beaveman and you at demos. I think one demo we saw you. And then yeah, I've seen you at a few demos. Right? And you're
Fascinating, Ronz.
what's that?
Fascinating. All right, let us begin then. Karrie,
Anyway.
you had some questions, or Ronz had questions. Let's hear them. Fire away. Please fire away.
Well, more so because Carrie's more of a big medieval and she reads novels on this. What are your questions before I fire off mine?
You mean kind of like how I just said, Karrie?
Yeah, I didn't have any questions. I'm just like I just like geek medieval stuff.
So there are no questions?
So Ronz,
Yeah.
there's no
Oh, well,
questions.
there you
Were
go.
you perplexed? What was the question? Okay, so let me set the stage then. So the type of sword work or the martial style or the European style that the Keith and I do is based off of Fiore di Liberi, who was in what would be considered modern day Italy.
What did you say about a library?
And so yes, and so this would be considered 100 years, almost 200, almost 200 years after the fall of the Templars, basically. So if you're thinking about the Knights Templar, and this is the question you had from Nightfall, Karrie, the Knights Templar would have had their last hurrah before they were destroyed in 1307. And so that's, you're talking
October
about Fiore
13th.
Liberi. He's in the late 1400s to early 1500s was his lifespan.
He's actually about 100 years before that. So he's really 1409, 1410.
Also about 100
is when he wrote. So he's about 100 years after, but it's a big transition time.
Oh,
so
100 years.
Yeah, 100 years.
So you're talking basically we're talking about the Middle Ages compared to more of the, say, Renaissance, early Renaissance time frame.
Mm-hmm.
That difference-wise. And so weaponry is a little bit different. For example, when you see Nightfall, a lot of the weaponry that you see, there's armament in general. They're still wearing chainmail, a lot of it. Plate-wise, I don't know what they had, plates on their shoulders, maybe. That'd be about it.
Maybe.
Was any other more plates than
I think
that?
for Nightfall.
Maybe on their legs, maybe. Yeah. And so heavier, more cumbersome, the chainmail, full-on chainmail with a metal helm or a helmet. And their swords in general, I would assume, I think most of them are single-handed sword with a large shield, roughly.
Yep. So how accurate are the weapon depictions?
So weapon depictions, I would say, are quite accurate. Initially, in terms of how they're thinking about showing weapons to some degree, except they all have long handles on their swords. They're all functioning with a much longer handle to that sword than you'd expect to see normally around that time. That time frame, you would have had a shorter, especially for single-handed swords, shorter handle. You start to see some evidence of a kind of proto hand-and-a-half sword coming out right around then. A great sword of war or something like that was coming out around then, where the handle is a little longer. It's not as long as you see at Fiore's time. So you're probably looking at, a 6 or 7 inch handle instead of an 8 or 9 inch handle, which makes a difference because you're grabbing it in a slightly different way and holding it differently. The shields, yes. In terms of the type of shield, I think there's some argument as to what type would be most common then. And evidence, unfortunately, most of our evidence comes from art, and that art is burial, sort of statuary, um, drawings in usually religious manuals, Bibles, that sort of thing, um, and then tapestries are your kind of primaries for what you're looking for. There is one fight manual, effect book, combat manual from that time period, created about 1300, and it shows what may very well be a civilian combat art with sword and small shield or buckler. They're unarmored, so it's a very different sort of gig than armored knights going at each other. But it does show how you would move and handle a sword and shield at that time, at least using a small shield. The rest of it we don't know. No manuals have survived. Nobody said this is how you fight, that sort of thing at that time. There wasn't a lot of written evidence or textual evidence. And the problem with all the tapestry work and the artwork and this funeral statuary is the artist made whatever was in vogue at the time, not necessarily what was in vogue at the time the person was fighting. So if a tapestry is created 80 years later, you'll see an anachronistic armor and weapons. And I think that's something you need to consider when you're looking at all of this. So how accurate is it? I'd say their armor is a little less accurate. I'd like to see less plate armor. It was there, but they're not dressed completely head to toe in chain, which I would expect to see more of. Less greaves. I think some of them are even wearing sabatons, so they're wearing like metal sheaths over their feet, and that seems a little anachronistic for that time period. Those didn't really start to crop up until the 1400s. So there's definitely some differences, but armor is probably the biggest one that's harder to deal with, and then the slightly elongated grips on the swords. Yep.
So was their fighting style based on the Bible, like it's mentioned in the series?
No.
No, because I remember there's one scene where
there's that appendix in the Bible where they've got the figures drawn.
Well, no,
for
no,
how to hold a sword and shield.
No, he's got to redeem himself. One of the Knights Templars got to redeem himself.
Oh, Landry, yeah.
Yeah, and he says and he's going through the combat ritual again where the Jedi shows up, right? Mark Hamill's in it, right?
Yeah, Mark Hamill's in it, yeah.
Right. And the recruits are just getting their asses kicked, and he says, and the Jedi Knights saying, remember your training, remember this. And he quotes a biblical scripture or something, but he says it's based on this, the Holy Trinity or something. So did they take their actual fighting style based on biblical scripture?
There's no fighting in the Bible that I'm aware of. Not that I've read the whole thing, but I don't recall any like combat training in the Bible.
Yeah, there's a lot of these armies clashed together and people died, and somebody was smote in the head with a stick, and that showed that God was awesome. There's a lot of that.
Yes. I think the Knights Templar is special, Ronz, because they actually had a system of fighting, as opposed to everybody else.
And I think that
so they actually had a style of fighting.
So the closest you're going to come to that, Ronz,
how to fight as a group.
Yes, sir.
The closest you're going to come to that, Ronz, is the premise that they're not using the Bible as a method for fighting. What they're saying is, remember the Holy Trinity, and the Holy Trinity is a mnemonic. It's a device. Why? Because everybody grew up, everybody was a member of the church. So you knew what the Holy Trinity was. You knew that there were three things, and they all come together, and they form this Holy Trinity. So what they're doing is saying, well, remember the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity may be something as simple as get your damn hand up in front of you so your shield blocks the other person, stab him in the face, and step forward. If that's their Holy Trinity, that's all he's saying is do the Holy Trinity. No different than somebody might use any other mnemonic down the road later on in fighting. But Fiore does use that. I mean, he doesn't say use the Holy Trinity, but he says, he uses numbers because numbers are important. It's very clear that he does that. He's using 12 guards of the sword in two hands, not because he needs to show them all, but because you don't want to show just 10 because 10 isn't a special number. 12 is. 12 is the number of months you have. 12 is the number of disciples or apostles. I mean, the 12 is important, so it's
Or
easy to
the
remember.
12 listeners we have, yeah.
So if that's the case, then
That-
yes. But
Well,
there's no freaking fighting style in the Bible.
Well, I was saying they were using it as a reference, but yeah.
Well, I think they're just referencing passages from the Bible in regards to remember this, protect your brother,
Yeah.
do this, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of thing. So, no, I mean, they have their own fighting style. There's a reason why they were able to, take during the Crusades, take Jerusalem and hold Jerusalem for what, almost 200 years or some shit like that. So, I mean, they were able to build blockades. They were able to build, a city on the site of a mosque, in whatever that name of the town is. I can't remember. That
Acre.
they eventually lost, but they were highly outnumbered. So, able to hold something like that for that long is impressive. So you're occupying a territory in the middle of being surrounded by everybody who wants you out of there. And I mean, let's be honest, the reason why there's
That
no
is
Templars
interesting.
is only because of money in the first place. They had all the cash, they had lots of money. They were lending it to foreign, governments or kings or whatever. And in order to get that money and, not have to borrow it from the Templars and not have to pay it back anymore, the Templars were destroyed. You got the money,
I thought they
you
were
got the
just
power.
tax exempt.
They were tax exempt.
So
They were tax exempt by the church. Yes, they were. But they also had all the money. They had the first real, if you think about it, they had the first international bank. Their original job was to protect people traveling to the Holy Land because people were getting killed along their way to go to the Holy Land. And so they took it upon themselves that, hey, let's start protecting everybody so they're not killed. And they kept doing that. And then eventually they were the ones amassing money, and you could deposit money in Europe and you didn't have to carry it with you, and the Templars would protect you all the way to the Holy Land. And when you got to the Holy Land, you could withdraw that money based on what you deposited back in Europe. So just like their own little banking branch. So they had all the cash. What was it, King Philip? Didn't want to pay the Templars back, wanted their money.
Mm-hmm.
Then he lied about them and had them destroyed, basically. If you believe they're destroyed. Unless you read the Da Vinci Code, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I have never read the Da Vinci Code, but I have seen Tom Hanks. So, is that good?
Yeah, it's close enough. I mean,
Yeah.
the Da Vinci Code is about Tom Hanks. It's absolutely about it. There's actually pretty good fight. I think there's actually pretty good fight scenes in Nightfall. I think that is actually pretty good. I don't know how, like Keith was saying, I don't know how accurate the shields are because we don't know. If you look at maybe like the carvings on the mausoleums where they have the bodies where they're holding their weaponry, I don't know if maybe the shields are a little short. Maybe I would kind of depicted wise. I don't know if they might be actually longer than they show in the show, but a really long shield might just be cumbersome for Hollywood.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Beav. I think that as you look at the shields, they're making them a very shorter kite shield, almost torso size, versus the very long, elongate Norman style shield that would have been used more often.
Almost like the teardrop.
Yeah, the teardrop, exactly. And then the question
which
I
makes
have,
sense. I mean, no, go ahead.
The question I have is, so a lot of these shields, they're very slightly curved, but there seems to be some evidence coming out of folks that are doing kind of 900 to 1100 sort of Viking and Northern European sort of work. But looking at some of these shields of the Carolingian sort of style, they're very deeply curved. Like the person would set inside them almost, and like it would curve around. You'd have a good 6 inches of space between the edges, depth-wise between the edges, and then the front of the shield. And that serves a very different purpose and a very different usage for that shield than what you see at this kind of flat knight shield that we think of, where it's just this flat board. It's not that. And so maybe even though they're doing some curving, and maybe it should be even more. Who knows?
Right, because you're trying to ward off to make a blow a glancing blow instead of a direct blow. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And kind of also where you're looking at the helm also is a little bit different because, the Templars had this really kind of almost looks like a kind of a flat helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And combatively, you're like, that doesn't make much sense because if you get a strike right to the head, to the top of the head, that's not going to be a glancing blow. That's going to be a crushing blow. But apparently that's relatively accurate. When you look at the depictions, I'm like, well, it looks like they had pretty flat helmets. Not saying that was exactly the best choice. But then you look at the
great
Saracen
helm for a
helmets
while,
and those.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and those
the great helm for a while was very flat,
conical.
and then right.
Would you let him speak?
No, I will
He's
not
a
let
wealth
him
of
speak.
information. No, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you. Right? This is like one of those Zoom calls where everybody's like, "No, you go. No." You were saying, Keith, about the helmets.
Wow. Ronz actually laid that out there, huh? Oh, I was literally agreeing with him. I think that, yes, there were sometimes, for whatever reason, probably due to how they were constructed, maybe, flat helms seemed to be something that were around on great helms, those kind of like over helms. And those really would just be put on in time, like you're going into battle. That's the only time you put that on, because you've also got a padded coif. You've got a mail coif over top of that. So you have like a hoodie that is padded first, and then you have something that's made out of mail over top of that. So mail rings interlinked, and then over top of that, you're going to put this great helm that's probably padded on the inside as well, and all of that's going to sit boom, 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 on top of each other. So they're actually putting a large amount of protection on there. Now, that having been said, the number of concussions probably was enormous, and you do see this transition from that flat great helm pretty rapidly to one that almost looks more like a very shallow cone on top.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Perspective of getting struck, and you want that to glance off.
So, also, who painted these? Right? Those shields look like they had paint on them, right? Blue and white or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did they apply dye to metal?
They're not metal.
Or paint to metal.
Nobody was using metal shields. They should all be wood at that time.
Yeah.
Thin wood shields.
They could be reinforced with iron on the outside, maybe,
but even then, most of the evidence seems to suggest there wasn't an iron rim. It generally was. You see woven grass, even that's like super compacted down. You see leather. You see felting. There's all these other things that are done around the edges.
Was that very effective against blows then? If it was made out of compacted grass?
Surprisingly effective, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I mean, the shields that we use now, not in training or whatever, people who train with armor, but police shields they're not metal either.
But they're a plastic.
They're a high composite plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no one goes into a riot, a police riot with, hey, I got a grass shield. That'll stop something. I guess in a way it would.
Well, he didn't mean the whole thing's made out of grass.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the rim. So like the rim, the rim is formed as very tightly woven. It's almost like rope. Think of it that way, Ronz. It's rope around the edge.
Okay.
And you're trying to hack into rope while someone's moving it around. How easy is that? And that's what they're doing. They're just giving.
Not against.
I mean, do you think that hay is not strong, Ronz?
No, it's not. I will say it's not
Well,
strong.
how about if you combine it with mud and water?
If you let it dry for a couple of days, then you got a brick.
I mean, what are the pyramids made out of?
I don't know. I wasn't there to build them. What are they made out of?
It seems like mainly sandstone, actually, but.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to seem like the smart one to the Beaveman. Right? I didn't want to put his ego in check. I didn't want to, say, hey, the Beaveman is not as smart as he seems to be. This is his podcast. We got to placate that ego of his. So we're going to do that. So I didn't know.
But no, you can make, bricks out of that particular little recipe there. So
there just appears to be.
In other words, it's not that something like that isn't strong, but if you take a stick and break it, one stick is not that much, but if you put 4 sticks together and try to break it, then now it's strong, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Did it, you know.
Whoa. That's like a martial arts practitioner analogy. Where'd you come up with that?
Like one of the Planet of the Apes movies.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
apes together strong. One ape.
You know,
small,
I have to
apes
admit,
together
the
strong.
Beaveman has been on his best behavior for you, Keith. He really has. Usually he's just
You haven't
screaming and
talked
yelling.
much.
I'm waiting. It's coming.
It's
But what I was going to say, Ronz,
Wait till
is you have to think about the fact.
Yes, sir.
Shut it. Yeah, thank you. You have to think about the fact that they're working on the premise that they're not going to just present the edge of this like it's a freaking log to be split. They're there going, oh, I want to avoid this. They're actively using that shield. They're probably, that is one of the things that does get to me, is I think that the presentation of how shields are used is very static. The shield's here. It's in front of me. I stand here. I try and hit things around the shield. But that does not appear to be what we see talked about and done. People are using, there's a shield guige or a strap that comes across the shoulder and neck, and that's used both to sling the shield on your back so you can rapidly access it, but it's also used as a way of deploying the shield. And you use that to help support it and move it, and it keeps a certain range of motion in place. And then they're turning the shield and using the shield in different ways that let them actively use it rather than sort of passively sit there and pound each other behind it. And that's one of the things that I think that fight style wise, they're probably getting completely wrong. Now, that having been said,
right, and when you see, movies and the way people do their, their little fun fights now, like, oh, hit my shield, now I'll hit your shield. Hit my shield, now I'll hit your. That's an exchange of blows, which is ridiculous. I'm like, why do that when I could just hit you with my shield in the face, or whatever? But
No, I understand.
There's
It's
no
like
point in
shield
trading.
should
Trading
be-
blows is
yeah.
ridiculous. That's not what you would do.
Yep.
And if you're
The
fighting with
shield
a bunch
should
of
be
other
dynamic,
knights,
not static.
maybe shut the fuck up when I'm talking to you about combatives. All right.
There we
When
go.
you're fighting
There
with
we
your
go.
brothers to your left and right, you're going to lock shields anyway and push and advance forward, or comes close together a little bit. By the way, I just wanted to mention, I'm looking at globalegyptianmuseum.org. And in Egypt, mud bricks were made of Nile mud, a mixture of clay and sand, sometimes mixed with bits of straw or animal droppings, and this mix was mixed to form a malleable mass and then pressed into molds and dried in the sun. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And you know how I knew that? I read that in the Bible, right next to the section where they talked about sword fighting.
Wow.
I believe that was in the story of David and Goliath, when they talked about the particular combatives that David was especially good at. The stick.
That is
Bricks.
interesting.
Fighting. All the
Bricks.
things.
Yeah.
Fighting. Stones. Slings.
Yeah.
All that fun stuff.
All the slings.
So how long, from the time you started in this practicing style back in the Crusades, did it take you to get up to being a Knight Templar? Is it, I'm pretty sure it wasn't over a season of TV, right? Like we see, like in 24 hours. Was it a pretty lengthy process?
So first, damned if I know. Second, I can make an educated guess based upon the fact that you would normally have a squire, or really you'd start off as a page at like the age of 6 or 7. You'd serve in a, it's not a sort of royal house, but a noble household, or in some place like the Knights Templar. And you'd be a page, and you'd go and you'd fetch things and scrub stuff, and you'd carry things for people, and you'd pour wine, and you'd stand around, to serve as a set of helping hands while learning stuff on the side. Probably part of which was involved by doing things like a couple of the squires, which would be the older kids, the like 12, 13, 14-year-olds, going, here's a couple sticks, now hit each other. Yeah, do it, come on. I bet 2 coppers on that one. That one looks scrappy, and that's part of your training right there.
What you do at the dojo.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Ron.
Yeah. And then they'd hold you down and make you eat boogers.
Yeah, pretty much.
They do that too.
But like that's where you start off, and you'd spend a couple of years doing that, and that's like how you would learn how to behave, how you'd learn kind of the basics. You'd be given your basic education at that point in time, and you might start to pick up some degree of martial experience. And then you become a squire, and that means you're somebody who like follows along behind a knight, does all the crap work that they don't want to do, cleans their armor, paints their shield, does everything else, repairs their weapons, brings them wine, brings them water, goes and deals with currying their horse, all the rest of the stuff that they don't want to deal with, and in return gets to learn a little bit about fighting. And that could go on for quite some time. Basically until they
may
needed
have to
you.
fight as a
Exactly.
second also.
Exactly. But you're not going to have as nice armor, probably. You're not going to have everything else because you're not expected to be the primary fighter. You might be like a knight could have 3 or 4 squires per se, and those guys are going to be guys following along behind with just lighter armor, spear, maybe a sword, but they're there to kill the guys that the knight didn't take out. They're there to cover his flanks.
I think there's 2 stories in the Flower of Battle about squires fighting. Isn't
I think
there?
there are, yeah.
That they had to, yeah.
Yeah, and like squires certainly fought. No, because they went into battle. The pages got left behind. The squires were there to help out. Pass. If you're doing during a tournament, those are the guys giving you your lances. Those are the guys making sure your swords are sharpened, everything's ready for you. But they're also the guys that are following you into battle and covering your butt, right? And some people that are doing that are not squires. They're never going to be more than essentially a retainer, a man at arms or something like that. So they're never going to become a knight. You're looking at somebody that has to. And in case of the Knights Templar, I don't know how it would work, but if you're talking about nobility, you got to be a noble. Simple as it gets. Nobody's going to become a knight without having that sort of patronage in place, or you have to do something really awesome. Then you get knighted.
Yeah. Romantically, I would speculate that in my great imagination that you could probably become a Knights Templar even if you weren't nobility because of everything that you had to give up to become one. Because you had to take the vow of chastity. You couldn't have money. You couldn't wear pointy shoes. You couldn't kiss your mother. I don't know why that's important, but
all the important things,
all those fun things. So clearly, it was. They probably did have to not conscript people, but they probably took volunteers, and you just had to do a bunch of stuff to become one. But it's not like you had to be nobility. Maybe that's you could kind of chalk that up to people who want glory from joining the military. I don't know.
Right. Now, part of the thing,
like I said, you do have to give up a lot.
Probably most of them, right? Most of them probably were nobility because those are the guys that were trained how to fight. So a lot of them probably weren't joining the Knights Templar at the age of 6. They were 20-year-olds who are like, yeah, I'm going to join the Knights Templar now. I'm going to pledge myself to the Knights Templar, at this point in time. And it may have been because they're the third son of some.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
that's
thinking.
exactly it. Like the first son got the stuff. He got the wife. He got the good dowry. He got the land. The second one got to go off to the clergy and make more, more money as a priest. And then the third one is like, well, we need to get rid of your ass because you're sitting around here staring at your brother who's got all the land, and you're going, what do I do? Oh, you go to the Crusades. How do you feel about the Knights Templar, son?
Which would be arguably is the combination of the two, because you're now you're the warrior, you're the religious warrior, so which is more can be considered more admirable and bring more honor to your family that way.
Exactly.
So yeah, I was going to lead into that.
You're not a girl, you don't have to go off to a nunnery. So
exactly.
But if you're asking for your own personal self, Ronz, you would not be allowed to be a Templar. Sorry.
No, I wasn't. It's like I was going to say so. No, what was it? I've forgotten actually, but it was along the lines of was going to be a Templar, a rite of passage, and from the explanation, yes, it was, but not everybody could join.
I don't think that too many people who are Jewish were joining the Knights Templar.
No. So if I may note, because I can use Google just as well as the Beaveman can, the Knights did not the Templars did not perform knighting ceremonies. Any knight wishing to become a Knight Templar had to be a knight already. But there were the noble knights, there were the non-noble sergeants of the temple, and then there were the chaplains. And the sergeants were clearly they were the non-noble families. They ran a lot of stuff, but they also fought alongside. They were men at arms as well. So they were blacksmiths, they were farriers, they did a lot of the support group work, but they also fought alongside men at arms.
So this is what had me wondering in the show, because you saw the most of the main knights have the white robes, but then you also saw, I think it was Draper had the black robe.
Yeah, and I
And so
don't
I was
know.
wondering if that, no,
I
you
don't know.
what-
Oh, well,
okay.
I mean, I saw that. I just don't remember I don't know what the difference is between those.
That's what I was always
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that might have been the explanation for it.
It's hard to say how historically accurate that is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Although it does look like the knights wore a white surcoat and the sergeants wore a black tunic with a red cross.
That makes
So
sense.
there you go. Sergeants are non-nobles. Knights are nobles, and they wear white. But anybody who gets knighted into the Knights Templar, especially as a peasant, that's a historical, to say the least. Because peasants, to get back to what Beaveman suggested at the beginning.
Don't worry, he'll edit that out.
That's what I thought. What he suggested at the beginning is that, yes, peasant arts versus noble arts. And
So
why?
here's an interesting
Why,
thing
Ronz?
on
Why
that, too.
peasants?
No,
Why, Ron?
Because they don't
no.
run things.
Here's an interesting. Yeah, no. Along the same lines, the red cross that the Templars wore on their robes was a symbol of martyrdom, and to die in combat was considered a great honor that assured them a place in heaven. Now, did they adopt that from the Muslim culture, or was that already inducted with their Christianity teachings?
I would say that was.
That's all convenience.
Convenience.
It is.
Yeah.
It's convenience. It's another power play by the church.
Yep.
Which is what you can always chalk all of it up to. You can chalk up the Crusades to the church having this brilliant idea of let's go take the Holy Land. It's all bullshit from the Catholic Church. If you want to talk about corruption, you want to talk about, hey, let's pick the Pope who's the oldest, but he's going to die soon. We want to pick one who's going to be one for more than a couple of years. And their family's going to take all the money, but I want to be Pope someday too. So let's pick that way. It's all about corruption. It's all about the money. It's all about the almighty gold piece, really. So if you want to recruit for the Knights Templar and you want to have them excited about taking the Holy Land, then you tell them it's okay for you to die in combat because it guarantees you a place in heaven. It's all about that manipulation of the Pope. And who was in charge of the Knights Templar?
Yeah. And conveniently it ends up then with you telling those people, join the Crusades, become a Templar, become whatever, but join the Crusades. You're guaranteed a spot in heaven if you die on the Crusades. Oh, and by the way, what's a great idea is just turn over your treasure, your lands, your treasure. We'll manage them for you while you're gone on Crusades. So you got noblemen doing that, where they turned over their lands to the church or to the Templars, and then went on the Crusades and happened to die, and then it just basically became the churches. So.
And here's an interesting fact too. This is more for the Beaveman because he is a.
Were you checking with Google?
Me?
No.
Go ahead.
But the Templars inspired Star Wars. The original Star Wars films were strongly influenced by George Lucas, your hero, interested in the Middle Ages. Apparently, earlier scripts referred to the Jedi Templars rather than the Jedi Knights. So, there's your tie-in for your big Star Wars life.
Wow, who isn't fascinated by the Knights Templar?
Or Star Wars.
That too.
And really, an earlier script said the Freemasons, the Jedi Freemasons.
Right.
Wow. But that's the secret version.
But he couldn't say that. So it was the Jedi Stonecutters.
Yes.
So, Karrie, you've been relatively quiet during this entire podcast. Do you have anything to add?
No, I'm just soaking it all in.
Now, for those who don't know, you had your own radio show. You did your own film.
That was a lifetime ago.
So, dead air meant, dead air. Right?
Dead air was a bad thing.
Why are you giving us dead air?
I am not giving you dead air. You are sucking.
She's not giving us dead air if other people are talking.
Yeah.
If other people are talking, she's not giving dead air, Ronz. Maybe you don't understand what dead air is.
No, you're right. I don't.
No.
I figured the one professional broadcaster among us would actually have something to say on this.
No, I'm just like soaking it all up. I just geek medieval stuff.
So,
Now,
what was your
Yeah.
then
favorite episode out of all
Oh,
this?
favorite
And can you
favorite
relate it
episode.
to a way that we could all understand it? And can you dumb it down for the Beaveman?
No,
that'd be too hard to do.
it's too hard to pick a favorite because number one, there was only like 2 seasons, and so just when you
Okay.
started getting really sucked into it, they're like, nope, we're done.
You know what I always find funny when I watch these shows that were supposed to have taken place, 800 years ago. I root for
That they
these
had film
characters and I'm like,
cameras?
shut up. I root for these characters and I'm like, man, I hope he lives. And I'm like, wait a minute, he's been dead for 800 years, even if this is based on an actual character. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He's dead no matter what. It doesn't matter if he died at old age
Yeah.
at 80 years old. He's dead. You root for the characters and you're like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Why am I rooting for them? They're already dead. But you never really did answer that question.
Rooting for them?
Right. Yeah.
I prefer rooting them so they don't get impaled and flayed and crucified. Instead, they just die later on. That's really the difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or-
True. Well, let's talk some
So-
weapons here since we've got Keith and his expertise, if you don't mind, Ronz. You're probably
No,
not going
I
to
don't
understand
mind.
any
In
of this
fact, I
stuff.
was
You
gonna
probably won't
say,
understand any of this
how
because you are
accurate were the
so
fight scenes?
interested in peasant arts.
Peasant arts.
And-
Did you know that
Yeah,
my
and you never
style
really
of
did-
martial arts was considered among the elite? You had to be part of an elite to
Which style is that?
take martial arts.
Which-
Karate.
What's that?
Karate. You had
Which
to
one?
be. Okay, whatever. Continue with
Okay,
your
but
question.
okay. Well, all right. So this is what we have. Did you know? I'm just going to say this as Keith is he's my sensei, and he's my
Whoa!
he's my also fellow. What would you say we are, Keith? We're kind of like scholars of Fiore, or what
Yeah,
would you say
I think
we are?
so.
I mean,
Scholars or students
I would
or
say you're more
scholars.
of a
You-
squire.
No,
you weigh
You're
more than
more of
I.
a squire, and he no, and Keith is more of the Knight Templar. You're
no.
the squire, the page behind him.
Keith is just a shade ahead of the Beaveman on the scholar, and that's really it. And that's just time and grade. I don't think I would not say
Okay.
that I am the Knight Templar or the Master or anything else like that.
Your
Frankly,
humbleness and humility astound to everybody.
frankly, if you really had to push me on this, well, I know it was a joke because the Beaveman is nothing if not humble in all ways. He
Yeah.
his
Wow, what Beaveman do you know?
the
Wow.
one that shows up to my
Did
classes.
he pay you?
But no, he is one of the best. He is the best student I've ever had for the Fiore end of things. Now, yeah,
I will have to say you are correct on that.
will you? Based on your extensive experience
Yes,
of my
I
other
will.
Thanks,
students,
Ronz.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Knowing that he shows up to 90% of your classes when he can because of his work schedule, we know that. And how extensively he has participated with you, not only in class, but in demos too. And how he has influenced other people to join. Yeah,
I try not to do
I
that.
would argue that is
Yeah.
not what he does. It's the opposite, but
I do not. I would argue that I do not encourage people to join.
But yeah, he's a pretty good guy.
I was totally lost on my whole. I had a very good question to ask because we were talking about
weapons, right?
Yes, weapon
Peasants.
peasants and weapons. Yeah, I was going to say what I was saying was that we have we have this resource here, which is Keith, and I can come up with any subject usually that I know very little about, and I can mention it to Keith. I can try to make it super obscure, and he'll know something about it, which is usually that would make you frustrated, but with me it doesn't. I'm always amazed that he knows that much about so many things. It also makes me feel like I've wasted a lot of my life not reading as much as I should, because he's only a little bit older than I am. So, but because we have him here, and because I've referenced the peasant art, and you insist that karate is not a peasant art, and I insist that it is, because as you know, Ronz, I'm most likely descended from knights. I didn't tell you that recently. I just found that out. I'm really not from
No,
this,
you did
this
not.
humble up.
I'm
I'm really not from
impressed.
this humble upbringing that I thought I was from. So if we could, I would like Keith to weigh in on this subject just a little bit from the history of karate as it comes from Okinawa, because I live a martial way of life, and the style that I practice that I'm not good at, but I do it anyway, is jujitsu, and I would argue that is not a peasant martial art like karate. But I'm not an expert. You are, Ronz. You are the spokesman for your style, as we've talked about. No one is known throughout the
I
world
am
more
not
than
an
you
expert.
in
No,
your
no.
style of karate.
Well, first of all, let's say, and and my mic's probably not picking everything up here, so, but I am not an expert in anything.
No, I
Right?
didn't really
If
think
I
you were. I was just
were,
saying that you are the
okay.
spokesman.
No,
You are
I
the
am
spokesman
a
throughout the world, though. You are the most well
no, I
known
am a
throughout the whole world.
practitioner. No, I am a practitioner of my style.
Don't be
Nothing
so
more. I
humble.
make mistakes like everybody else. No,
That's fine.
I couldn't
Can we
even.
just have Keith weigh in? Could we just have Keith weigh in on his opinion
Okay.
about what I've
All right.
said?
Let's let Keith weigh in.
Well, speaking of somebody who does not do karate, however, does do several other martial or practices several other Japanese martial arts, including the jiu-jitsu style, which is that I train in, which is Japanese, but comes from a Japanese family that emigrated to probably during the most recent conquest of Okinawa by the Japanese, at which point in time the Okinawan ruling class was effectively decimated because that's what the Japanese did when they conquered you. They did not say, ooh, let's keep the rulers around and let them be happy people underneath us so they can foment rebellion. They said, we need peasants to grow rice. This is because, they were not nice people. However, they were not nice people who went ahead and probably took care of any general tendency towards having more than a peasant art. Now, how do we think we know it's a peasant art? There's a lot of talk about, well, it's really a noble art that was all maintained by having these peasant weapons. We didn't maintain it with spears and swords and bows. Instead, we maintained our art by, I don't know, using sticks and using agricultural implements, digging tools, and stuff like that. I would probably argue that's a peasant art. And that having been said, unlike Beaveman, I would say our jiu-jitsu style has some peasantish bits to it, right? Really, what are our weaponry? Our weaponry is sticks. We occasionally tie somebody up. That's a pretty minor thing, but it's part of it. We don't do a lot of, say, grappling with armor, so we're not going back to samurai times. Although even then, you could have been a peasant and still been co-opted into an army. We don't do the big weapons of Japanese martial samurai class, which would be sword, polearm, naginata or otherwise, or spear, and bow. We don't do horsemanship. We don't do, I don't know, matchlock riflery, which was one of the things that was taught as well. We don't have any of that.
You guys don't have the room. You guys don't have the room to do horsemanship at the dojo.
We do not, which is why I don't do it for Fiore either, who does have an extensive section of horsemanship. That is not a peasant art. That is an art of nobility. It's brutal and unpleasant nobility, but still nobility. So I would probably argue that anybody saying, "Oh yes, a karate style is a noble, is a art of nobility," is probably somebody who has bought into a very interesting story. And that's because I'm not necessarily because I'm biased, but just because I'm like, you can't show it and prove it. Nobles went out in armor and killed people with real weapons. They didn't say, let me grab my digging implement and attack you with it. That's what peasants do. Just like English in the 1500s with bill hooks. That's a peasant implement. You didn't see English knights using bill hooks. They used properly made pole axes and they used it to crush other people with. Bill hooks are for the mass of people behind you.
So when you look at another famous Crusade film, right, and I'll mention the title, how accurate were the battle scenes and the fights when they were attacking castles and other battles during the movie? I'm speaking in particular to Monty Python and the Knights of the Holy Grail.
Incredibly accurate.
that
That is
was-
exactly what they did during the high medieval era that was depicted. Actually, it wasn't really high medieval. That would have been early medieval at best, possibly Dark Ages, when we had Arthur, King of the Britons, wandering around. So anachronistic armor, anachronistic weapons, and the French do not swear and curse at you and call you, hamster who smells of
And you didn't smell
elderberries.
of elderberries.
Exactly.
So, I have to
But
ask.
thank
where
you
they
for
got
the question,
coconuts.
because it made me feel ever so
So-
much smarter. You have drained my
thank
IQ that much, Ronz, just by your question. I feel
does that.
notably
He does
stupider.
that. That's why I keep him around.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, during that movie, the pages followed behind were the squires or the bards, and I just want to know where they got the coconuts from.
There was extensive
you know,
trade
We're imported.
during that era.
Imported.
Silk Road.
Yeah. Silk
Yeah,
Road. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, but did they
Now-
establish trade routes with China at that time?
Do coconuts come from
Yeah.
China? Really? Really, Ronz?
Well, someone mentioned
Where
the
do
Silk
coconuts
Road.
come from? Come, tell me.
Coconut trees.
That is very good of
Coconut
you.
trees.
These are called coconut palms.
You know what? I have
Where do
to hand it
pineapples
to-
come from?
No. I have to hand it to the Beaveman. He asked the question and he set me up, and once again, I did not see it coming. Bravo, Beaveman. Bravo.
Do pineapples come from a tree, Ron?
Actually, they're considered a bush. They're a berry.
So they don't come from a tree?
I don't think they do.
That wasn't the answer to the question. Do they or do they not come from a tree?
I'm not sure. I can't honestly answer that. I can't honestly
right.
answer that.
Oh, Ronz. I wanted to make it a point about the whole peasant thing again. Here's what I found fascinating.
What did you find fascinating?
Well, when everybody talks about how, this was not the way of the samurai, this was not the way of the samurai. But we're talking, the way of the samurai hasn't been the way of the samurai since before, when they weren't even called samurai. So we're talking 400 years. Because if you think about it, the gun or some depiction of the gun has actually been around since, the 13th century, the 1200s. The first depictions of it are from the Chinese. So when they were giving the ruler of the Oda clan a hard time about using guns, this was already a couple hundred years later. So they hadn't been primarily only, he wasn't really advancing everything so drastically. And when people talk about how, you're not sticking to the way of the samurai, it hasn't been the way of the samurai for hundreds of years. So to actually try to hold on to that tradition, you're not even holding on to that tradition. Like Keith said, there's an actual art of firing the gun. So, it's a ridiculous depiction. Kind of like, that's kind of why I'm messing with you. I only mess with you, Ronz, because of your attraction to the more peasant art. That's why I mess with you.
My attraction, huh? And what attracted you to your art, your practicing art?
You really want to know the actual answer to that question?
Oh, hell, why not? Let's go.
Okay, here's the actual...
No, I think Sensei Keith answered it quite well. I will accept that answer.
I would like to hear Beaveman's answer, because frankly, I cannot answer for him. That's ridiculous. I'm not him.
Ronz, don't be a
Yeah,
dick.
come on, man.
He's not me.
What do you expect?
Why you gotta be a
I don't
dick?
speak for my
Okay.
I will...
students, fellow practitioners. How can I do that?
Yes, I will answer your question of the two styles that I primarily entertain and attempt to achieve some sort of proficiency. The reason why I take jiu-jitsu is thus. Many, many, many years ago, my family started at the dojo before I did because I did not know what martial art I wanted to take. And they started taking karate, which is also now known as COVID Te, or the way of the COVID hand, which is what Ron practices. And so,
No, hold up.
with
Now,
that.
hold up. We take
I'm
very
telling you a
good
story.
precautions. Yeah, well, we take precautions to make sure everything is sanitized and no one is hurt. right? And everything is okay.
And the dojo is no longer
So
known as the
continue with your
dojo. It is now
story.
known as the Rojo. All right. So my family started taking karate or karate, which is the empty hand. Hand is empty. And I was watching them and I'm like, well, I'm going to observe these other classes. And at this time, I was about 220 pounds. And because I had gained weight very rapidly, I was on some antidepressants. And thankfully, I got off those. But in about a matter of a year, I gained like, I don't know, 50 pounds or something like that. And so I went in and I observed karate or karate. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Read the descriptions of the other stuff, and I was initially sort of interested in Aikido, but I was like, you know what? This description of jujitsu seems far more interesting. And the class that I happened to have observed, that particular day, they were doing what's called randuri. And in randuri, it's just basically this slowed down, basically fighting, if you will. And in the center of this randuri was this rather large man who did not look like he was probably able to run a marathon, but yet he was
That would be
throwing everybody
correct.
who attacked him very effortlessly throwing them, and they were being smashed very easily upon the ground. And I was like, wow, and it didn't look like he was exerting much effort whatsoever. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, that's what I want to be able to do until I'm an old man, because I'm not able to run a marathon. And so subsequently, after that, I started taking jujitsu, and I almost dropped out because I would get. This was right after our two senior classmen, actually three of them. We had 3 black belts at that time, and it had just been not that long after the 2 of them had just had their black belts. And our practices were pretty hard. There was a couple times that I left there throwing up. I went home and threw up. There was one time my wife had to give me an IV. And so I was going to actually quit going, but Keith didn't let me stop going. So I kept going. And of course, I do not weigh 220 pounds now.
Exactly. I have
So
gained
that is why
the weight that John Beaveman lost. Because I do practice the way of effortlessness.
But
I
that was
will
the
have
whole
to
point.
agree with. Yeah, I will have to agree with the Beaveman. I remember I was training a fellow practitioner, and you were watching, Keith, and you said, "Hey, do you mind if I come in?" And yeah, I said, "No problem." And I still remember this day like it was yesterday. And you were the most humblest guy. It's like, "Can I offer you some advice?" Heck, yeah. And you said, "Here, I'm going to
Don't do
attack
locks,
you."
bitch. You don't know how to do them.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. And he goes, "I'm going to attack you now." And I said, first of all, sensei, because I called him, that's what he is. I said, "We kiat." And I'm like, "Oh, well, we don't in our style, but okay, this is the style that you guys see." And he stood back and he let out this roar. I mean, it was just freaking amazing. And
you peed a little.
no, but I can tell you the other person on the other end of that roar crumbled quickly without him even touching that person.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. So yeah, he is just that much more amazing, and when he does something, it's effortless.
Yes, the speed with which he moves is kind of astounding, actually. Yes, the speed with which he can close distance is, I would say,
Oh yeah, he closed the distance really easy.
Is
I was amazed.
disproportionate to what you would assume that someone that size could close distance. It's very scary.
I think because of his girth, he lets that speak.
Did you just call my sensei girthy?
I believe
Yes,
you
I
did.
did.
Yes. Yes.
I did.
Just
I did.
Oh, boy.
say my sensei is
Yeah.
girthy.
You
Did
know,
you just
I-
insult?
No, I didn't insult that. I
You
think he used that to
just
his
insult my
advantage
sensei?
because they look at him and they think, "Oh, he doesn't move that fast." And they,
You know what happens when you insult someone's
Oh,
sensei?
I
You know what
did not
happens from that?
insult your
We had this
sensei.
discussion before. Have you not seen the old kung fu movies? Do you know what happens?
Dueled to the
What
death.
happens?
Now I
I
must
did
beat
not
the shit out of
insult
you.
your
That's what
sensei.
happens.
I did not insult your sensei. right?
Part 2
I-
of why I take my other martial arts, my European martial arts. The reason why I take that martial art, shut up, Ronz, I'm
And
talking,
why is that?
is because who wouldn't want to swing a sword, first of all? I don't understand people who don't want to swing a sword. Anyway, and because I knew that if I took that, it was fulfilling a dream of mine to, have other people to swing swords with. And incidentally, I also recognized that it was
So
something that I
you're
could
into the
come.
sword crossing thing? So
Not that
you're
kind of
into the
sword.
sword crossing thing.
Yes, I heard you.
So I know. Hey, I didn't say it was any other kind of sword. It's
I'll
up
tell
to
you what. I'll give
call
you
it.
a sword. I'll give you a sword. I will take a sword, and then I will let you swing at me, and see what happens. I guarantee
Oh,
you,
I
you
know
won't hit my
exactly what will
sword.
happen.
Yes, what would that?
I
What will happen?
guarantee I will be. I
You'll
will
pop a
run
chubby?
away
Is that what you're
because
gonna
your
say?
sword is probably no. Your sword is
Mine's
probably
longer than
girthier
yours.
than a
Is that
lot
what
of
you were gonna
swords.
say?
Yeah,
Did you say
I'm
my
going
sword's
to
longer
say
than
that.
yours?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Anyway, continue.
I was gonna say that I also assumed, and I knew very relatively quickly, that I would be able to become relatively proficient in that art form, which is also why I took Tang Sudo, because I knew that I could become proficient in that art form. And the reason why it's important for me to become proficient in other art forms is because I will never master jujitsu, but I could probably come pretty
I thought
close
it's
to
because you look
mastering
pretty
the other ones.
badass in a gi.
No, I look better in the
Yeah,
all
honestly.
black, with my little black skirt and black tights with a sword than I look in a gi.
It's very true. Everyone looks better in that than in a gi. Really.
I feel
true.
so. Yes.
Yeah. If it didn't cost more to have a
What do
purple
you call
top,
it?
that would be the way to go, though. Royal.
Is it
Yeah.
a black skirt or a kilt?
It's an armored skirt.
It's like a skirt. It's a skirt, to keep you from getting stabbed in the nuts.
Yeah. If you want the technical
Yeah.
term, it'd be
Okay.
It's quite
tassets.
impressive when I wear it.
Yeah.
It's quite impressive when I wear it. You'd be impressed. It's quite cool.
Oh, when do you wear it?
What? I'm not gonna put it on for you right now.
Well, much to my disappointment. Okay.
Ronz does have a certain look in his eye.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, I'm sure there's pictures of me probably on the probably on the dojo website. There's probably pictures of me wearing it.
Not the
We
ones
did
with
a
you in
demo.
handcuffs.
The Swan and I did a demo where we actually were full out wearing that stuff.
And I believe you were
something. I
there
can't
and
remember
taking
what.
pictures of it, Ronz.
I
Yeah,
might
believe that's
have.
probably accurate.
Yes.
I might have. I might have.
So, Karrie, you have no questions. That's it. You've
no
got the
questions.
Keith.
I
You
was
got
just,
Keith on here. You had no questions.
yeah.
You were just happy
No,
to be here and listen to the idiocy that
I was
is your
invited.
husband every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's nothing new. I'm used to it.
Well. Yeah,
She just said
who
she's used to
needs,
it. Also.
I'm used to it.
Oh, well, thank you, my dear. Yeah. Oh,
So,
well,
besides
that's the
feeling
way it
sorry
goes, I
for
guess,
Karrie right now, let's go ahead and circle
Yeah.
back around
Jesus.
on Ronz to the
Yes.
peasant. So, why do you think you don't practice a peasant art? What is your rationale? I've
Ooh,
given
good
you
question.
the reason why you do practice a peasant art. What is your rationale for not practicing it?
Honestly, I always thought that I did practice a peasant art I'm saying that in the loosest term.
Oh,
No, I'm
now
saying
you're
that.
saying you practice a peasant art?
Hold on. I'm
No.
getting there. Oh my God. Would you, Xanax boy, let me talk here. So anyway, what happened was I saw one of these like a documentary, and it took my train of thought in a whole new direction of the way it was, how it was certain nobilities that would practice that. It was handed down father to son, and it made sense to me that that's the way it was. Now, I'm pretty sure that there were some practitioners of Okinawan styles and other styles that would allow trusted members of their inner circle to join and learn, and that's how that got passed down. So that's the way I looked at it. right? I always thought at one point it was the peasants. When the invading armies came in, they took all their weapons, they had nothing to do to fight back with, and they developed a hand-to-hand combat, and they developed a weapons combat out of sheer necessity. I know there were other influences, and someone said, "Oh, what if I tried this? And what if I tried that? That might work." But also going back to what Keith said, that there were certain nobilities back in medieval ages, of course, and Japanese, we'll say around the world, that usually if you were going to be part of a family member in a hierarchy, it was a nobility's rite of passage to learn these arts and pass it on to, well, what am I getting at? The future generations.
We don't know.
Future generations, right? So that's where I took that thought. Now, up until then, I always thought it was mere farmers and whatever learned it. Fishermen learned it, because some of the weapons I use are of farm implements. But I've been told otherwise on some occasions, and I've listened, and I take it with a grain of salt. I could be right, they could be right. I could be wrong, they could be wrong, right? I know that one of my weapons I use, there are two of them. One is called an ieku, which is a rudder or an oar. That's definitely from a fisherman's point of view. And the other one's called a nunti, which is a fishing spear that I've learned to use. So, that's from fishermen. Most noblemen didn't go fishing up until they found out there was a tackle and bait shop somewhere. But other than that, that's where I drew my conclusion on that. Most of the weapons out there, bow, sai, maybe tonfa, maybe tanaka, were all other implements that were used, including kama, were used around the farm and mill.
Not the sai.
No. Well, there are two versions of the sai that it could be used as a samurai or a police badge, right, for impaling. Yeah. But there was also that it could be used to poke holes in the ground, depending on where you look at it.
I disavow any knowledge of that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. You're entitled to my opinion because we're married. Right?
Don't the police carry just the one?
Yeah, the jute.
Just have the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the jute. Right. But once again, I'm if I'm wrong, please school me and I'm wrong, and that way I can learn. Right. But I agree with what Karrie is saying, that it was a police badge, right, or a nobility's badge, right. But I've also heard other versions that it was used to poke holes in the ground for seeds. Nunchaku, right? I didn't know were used for swinging, peeling bark off of trees, right? I never knew that. I always thought it was just a flailing weapon for rice husks, right? So every style's got their own version of where it could come from, but which one is right?
I would say this. This is what I would say, and I've had this conversation with lots of other people before. The understanding that we have as Westerners of martial arts and their history is pretty bad. So unless you really dive into it, and I think that one of the books that some of the books that I read from the early, the stuff are about, like about Budo or Bushido and things like that. I think by Don Draeger, even some of that, where he was considered to be pretty accurate. He's probably not as accurate as everybody thought he was, because we're getting stuff that's handed down, and how much of it is actually accurate that we're told as Westerners in the first place. And so when you look at that and you look about, the people that are in charge or the people that are in heads of schools and things like that in the United States, you have to take that with a grain of salt also. And you have to be very conscious of what it is that you're learning. And like, I don't know if that's accurate or not. I actually joke a lot about our style and say, I don't even know if I believe that our founder actually existed, or if maybe they just made him up and took some pictures of some dude. I don't know. Or, I like to make fun of it. I'm like, because we hear these things like where he was able to disappear. And you're like, what? What do you mean he was able to disappear? No, he would just blink out of nowhere. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Just kind of crazy shit like that. So, and plus, for us, our style doesn't have much of a lineage that we know. We can't really track it down at all. We've got two crazy Westerners who are the, quotes heads of our style. So I don't know what the fuck those guys are talking about either. So unfortunately, it falls on the head of my sensei for us to listen to him. And he doesn't usually blow smoke up our ass. So What the whole point is that you take the style, you make it how you best you can, and you make it combative, and that's what you want to make it effective. Where the actual lineage comes from, where the history comes from, it's probably all peasant bullshit, honestly. I mean, because like I said, if you look back 400 years, how that's when you had nobility, 400, 300 years, 200 years, you get much closer than that. Where was the actual true warrior that lived by this, the Bushido or that particular way? So after that, it's all militaristic. That's totally different. So all that romantic stuff it's hundreds of years old. It's so far removed from what we are now. We're all peasants practicing some art form. I just like to say that some art forms are more peasant than others, especially the ones the Ronz gravitates to.
I see.
And I would say I 100% agree with Beaveman. I will say, oh yeah, I practice an art of nobility, but let's be realistic. My ancestors were probably chased out of Europe. Several of them were chased out of Europe because of their religion. I know that for a fact because they didn't believe in somebody else. Who knows how many were chased out because they were criminals? Because my family's been here for a couple hundred years. That means that there's a lot of people that were not wanted somewhere else that came here. And they've been farmers for much of that time. That means they're pretty much peasants. There's not a lot of nobility in my background. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But I'm still studying an art of nobility, and I'm still studying an art that really is, as the Beaveman noted, probably taught by a crazy Japanese guy. At the best. That's as far as back we can go. Like crazy Japanese guy is the best that we know, who taught a couple crazy Western guys, who then taught me, and that's it. Like I've got a grandfather in it, and he's the one who created it, and who knows what he created it out of, but it seems to work, so I do it.
Right, and that's the important, and that's why I say for us that's the important thing. So, and for us, that's why I say you have to be really careful of Westerners when you see all these and not specifically talking about our style, but when you see all these Americans running around with 10th Dans and 9th Dans and 8th Dans, and I'm like, who the fuck gave you that rank? JoJo. Some other Westerner gave you that rank. When I look at the Grandmaster of, Tang Soo Do, the style that I took, he's a 10th Dan. He's a legit 10th Dan given to him by Korean 10th Dan, training in it for 60 fucking years. He's a legitimate 10th Dan, known throughout the whole world. But you'll see kinds of all kinds. You can throw a rock and hit some 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th Dan. And I'm like, so you always have to take that with a grain of salt. For me personally, when I look at different styles, I'm like, okay, you should probably stop your Dan rank at the last time you were given to it by the head of the style, as opposed to, hey, let's just keep getting, like, what difference does it make? I'm a second Dan. That just means I listen twice as well as a first Dan. I guess, I don't know. I wouldn't even argue that. I've forgotten more shit than I should. I've forgotten more shit. I've forgotten more shit than Ronz knows.
That's probably true. No, that's probably true.
Lord only knows what that says about me there, Beav.
No. But back to what you were saying, though, I mean, yeah, I would prefer to be enlightened and proven wrong so I can change my ways.
But who knows the right answer? Right. You have to be a historian. If you want to know the right answer, you can't listen to what other people in your style have told you. You have to actually be a historian and look and find these things yourself. Because you can find we had this discussion the other day, Keith and I, because you can look at, there's old depictions of shooting the bow and arrow with the arrow notched on the right side of the bow, and then we shoot it commonly on the left side. And I'm like, I wonder when that happened. Was that something that we did here in the West, or can you see that through other cultures? Because, I mean, I know in like the Japanese style where they shoot the bow, they're on the right side of the bow. So like, when did we start doing it on the left? So these are all things like historically you would have to look back and not listen to Joe Bob Dickhead tell you, oh, that's been done throughout all time. Those depictions are wrong. We've always done it on the left side of the bow. Well, no, that's not accurate. Americans take things and they change things. Not saying that we're the ones who did that with a bow, but the Vikings never had horns on their helmets, as an example. That's a Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
But yet everybody thinks that accurate. That's not accurate. There's all kinds of goofy shit.
Well,
so if
doesn't
you really
every
want to know answers
style,
to stuff,
doesn't every yeah, but doesn't every style take something from another culture and make it their own in some way and flip it?
yeah, there's only so many movements that a body can do. So therefore,
Not
a
true.
kick that I
Do you know what jujitsu means?
yes, it's the gentle art of folding a person's clothes while they're still in them.
Exactly.
But the point
There
is,
are a certain number of
there's
ways it
only
works
so
for
many
that.
ways. Yeah. There's only so many ways the human body can move. So therefore, a front kick that I do in America is going to look a lot like a front kick that somebody does in India, even if we were never taught how to do a front kick. The body moves in a specific way. So that's why all these things look different. All they look the same. Does it mean that everybody stole from each other? Yes. Does it also mean that this is a specific way the body can move? Yes. Universal thinking.
So no,
And yes, we
that's
all steal.
fantastic. I
And we
mean,
all
I didn't
steal,
know
but
you
you shouldn't
studied.
do locks
I
because you're
didn't know
terrible
you
at them.
studied in. No, you're right about that to a point. I remember when I think I did some. I've been schooled on how I think I do a certain wrist lock technique wrong. I was showing somebody, and I think it was Keith who came up and said, "No, you're doing it this way," and then he put me on the floor in about 30 seconds. However, I have to say this about Keith. When you ask him a question, be prepared to get the answer in two ways. One, if you're a novice, he'll explain it to you. If you're a practitioner of martial arts, he'll explain it to you that way.
Physically.
Physically,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, is that not the best way to know how to do it?
It is.
I don't know.
To be
Let's ask
shown
your
physically?
what was that? What's below your nose? The septum, Karrie, right?
You're
Okay, yes. And when he asked, she asked, here, you go ahead and tell the story, Karrie.
No. Yes.
No?
That was
No?
that was painful.
Did you learn though?
I did.
She asked the question what the yarbo you use is for. And Keith, Sensei Keith, politely said, "Come here. I'll show you." And I thought that was fantastic. You learned.
But were you there the time that Keith demonstrated for, I think this was like on a 1-1-1 when Keith demonstrated the locks with the UB bow on my wrist and my wrist broke the UB bow in half?
No.
That was
I don't
impressive.
Well, yes, but it's just because it was an old UB bow and probably really dry, but it still looked pretty sweet.
It did.
It did look sweet. It did look pretty awesome, but it was just my chi that broke it. It was my chi. All right, well,
So you
since
have
the Ronz has no
wrist
more
of
questions of any
steel.
value whatsoever,
What do you mean? I have plenty of questions. But, you're right. It's time to wrap up the podcast.
well, I didn't ask any of the questions I was going to ask, but that's fine. I can ask them later at a later date.
What did you want to
Actually,
ask?
I can ask really question. This is actually a really quick question I'm going to ask Keith. In your opinion, if you had to do one-on-one armored combat, what one weapon would you pick? You're armored, your opponent's armored.
Ooh.
Oh, it's poleaxe all the way.
Yeah.
Poleaxe?
Poleaxe. Yeah. Yeah, it's hefty, but on the other hand, nothing opens that can like a poleaxe does. I mean, if we're talking medieval weapons,
answer.
if on the other hand we're going to go to
Yes.
something above and beyond that, but yes, medieval weapons, poleaxe, we're good.
Yeah, medieval weapons.
Yeah.
And I did I think a small demo like 2 years ago.
I don't think I was
COVID.
asking. I don't think I was asking you what weapon you would pick, Ronz.
Yeah, no, you didn't have to. But I was.
I was not asking you.
You don't have to ask. You have to listen. So yeah, the preferred weapon I think you took me down during the demo was a poleaxe, Keith.
Possibly.
When we were at the
It was Geek Fest.
Expo, Geek Fest.
I don't know. It all blends together, Ronz. How many times have I done something horrible to you
How many times
with a
did he take
weapon?
you down?
There are many of them.
Okay, there are many.
I would say I'm just going to pretend that I was asked that same question.
I would like to.
Beaveman, what is your preferred weapon of choice on combat?
Well, I would say, I mean, of course, I would like to pick the sword because it is of royal blood. But I would like to ask this question of Keith. What would you think about using poleaxes? I would pick poleaxe also, but how about what is it called? Is it the glaive? Is that what it is? Where you got the little
The
flail at the end
Gavarina,
of
the
long
big
stick?
honkin'. Oh yeah, the flail. Well, that's another poleaxe. The flail at the end of the
Is that
long
what it is?
stick. That
Yeah,
he shows. Yeah, he
I was
shows a
thinking maybe
poleaxe with a
that.
chain on it. Yeah, because he's all sneaky
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, possibly
Now,
something like that, or the
I
flail.
mean, if we go to
the flail
peasant
with a big
weapons,
hunk
we
of
could
metal.
right go to peasant weapons. You can just use a two-handed flail, like they'd use for threshing grain, like a nunchaku, but better, because it's got more.
It's got more.
And more is
Yes.
better.
Yeah, and more is better.
Definitely
Or the
more
mace,
better.
something like that.
Mace. Oh, mace is good. Well, really,
Mace is
you
a
just
good
want to be like
Mace
one
is
of
a
the
good one.
Polish Husserite knights of the 1500s that have got like a mace and a warhammer and an axe and a sword and two spears and a lance, and it's ridiculous. They're crazy and they're beautiful and they're giant. And by the way, they also have huge wings made out of
Yes.
feathers that stand up behind them. So when they charge at you in this thundering herd of like armored cavalry and horses with lances ahead of them, there's wings fluttering around them. Amazing.
And this is why I would say the Polish are one of the greatest armies of all time.
It's just their time has passed, unfortunately.
Yes, their time has passed.
But
well, I mean, up until World War II,
Oh,
you
yeah.
still can't say that. People make fun of the Polish people. I'm like, yeah, well, they took on the Nazis in tanks while they were on horseback. They took them on.
Bingo.
So people make fun of them. I'm like, no, there's nothing more badass than that. They fought knowing that they were going to die.
Yep.
All right.
The Poles
Well,
were the terror
that
of
is
Eastern
my
Europe
question.
for years. Hundreds of years.
Yeah. Total badasses.
Very awesome.
Total badasses.
Yeah.
I think so.
Completely.
But the reason why I was making fun of you, Ronz, because it's fun to do.
Oh, there's a reason why you do this. Okay.
Yes, the difference is when I do, this is a mindset thing, but when I do jujitsu, very often in my mind, I picture those movements in armor because there's an order of battle. In other words, I've already used my lance or my spear. I've already used, my bow and arrow. I've already used my sword. I've already used my short sword, whatever. And so now I'm battling in armor. That's how I look at jujitsu. Very frequently, it pops into my head. How would this work at the articulations of someone's armor? But I'm assuming this doesn't happen to you.
That's a
Karrie,
fantastic way of looking at it.
Because you wouldn't be wearing armor because you're peasants.
Well, that's a great way of looking at a kata.
You're fighting in your underwear.
Oh.
You're fighting in your underwear. That's what's happening.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to fight somehow, right? I'm not using silkies, so. But yeah, that's a great way. In fact,
totally
that
fighting
was just
silkies.
actually explained to me that a kata's a fight. That's the way to look at it, right?
That was just explained to you. That was just explained to you.
That's one way of looking at things.
Well, I guess you're always learning. That's good.
Yeah,
you're still a student. That's fantastic. Well, I would like to thank Keith for joining us for this this ridiculousness that is the Slaptail Squad. Made even more ridiculous by my number 2, the Ronz, and that's why he's here. He's special. He's special in his own way. Special. Yeah, I mean, special is actually. I mean, just say it nicely. He's special. Also, I'd like to thank Karrie, his lovely wife, not only for being on the show, but for putting up with the Ronz. Because what more can anyone expect of her but to have to do that? And Ronz, as always, thank you for you being
all right.
you.
All right, enough out of you, young lady. Wow. I know, it's like, yeah. You know what?
It's over that.
I appreciate.
Shut up, Ronz. I'm trying to say goodbye. Oh my god, that's fine. Just keep talking.
Well, no, I want to explain something real quick. It's like when you told me to get Keith on, and I realized I dropped the ball a bit. But when I finally got him on, you were texting me yesterday. Hey, I got Keith, and we're just kind of locking in the time. It's like you came back, and I let Karrie read the text. It's like you had to contact him 3 weeks out before that. I said, "Oh, you got the same email I got then. What did you get?" And I'm like, at that point, I knew.
No, you never said you had Keith. You said, "Are you good
I
for
was
this
trying to
time?"
lock
You didn't
him
say
in
you
for
had
8.
him. Yeah,
I
that
didn't
was
say I
after
did.
that.
I
That
said I
wasn't
was
your
trying to
first. That
lock
wasn't
him
your
in.
first text, Ronz. That wasn't your first text. Your first text is asking me if you had it, and then
All
I
right,
asked
you
you,
know,
did you actually
I
have
have
a
my
confirmed
text right
time?
here, but
Okay, go ahead and confirm what I just said, because you
no.
never
You know
seem to
what?
get it right.
I will just say the Beaveman is right because the Beaveman is always right.
Yes, because your
Right?
first
And
text
that will
didn't
end
say that
the
you had a
argument.
confirmed time. That's why I was asking you. Did you? Got it?
All right,
Yes.
fair enough. No, you're right. I did not have a confirmed time. I had a confirmed date.
Ugh.
Almost.
Well, that's it for
Okay,
me, the Beaveman, saying adios, mooch fuckos. Say
And
goodbye,
from the
Karrie.
Ronz A.
Bye.
No, you're last, Ronz. You can just
And
you're last, Ronz. You can just say goodbye
what?
last.
Keith
It's
is not
hard.
gonna say
It's hard
anything.
to stay in order. It's difficult.
He just can't do it. He's my special little guy. My special little guy.
Oh,